What if the people you trusted most saw you as entertainment instead of a person? Claire never thought a simple Friday night could change everything. The house was glowing with warm light. Laughter echoed from the living room, and music hummed softly in the background. Ethan had invited his old college friends over, Jake, Ryan, and Liam, to celebrate his big promotion. Claire wanted it to be perfect. She'd spent the whole afternoon cleaning, cooking, and setting the table. She wanted Ethan to be proud of her, proud of them. At first, everything seemed fine. The air was filled with stories from college days, wild nights, bad jokes, old memories. Claire smiled politely, refilling glasses, bringing snacks, and laughing at the right moments. Ethan looked so happy surrounded by his friends that she didn't want to spoil the moment. But slowly the energy shifted. It started with small jokes, harmless at first. Jake teased Ethan about how lucky he was to have a wife like Claire. Ryan added that she seemed too perfect, like one of those women in movies who smile even when they're tired. Claire laughed it off, not wanting to seem uptight. But inside, she felt a flicker of discomfort. The teasing grew bolder. One of them imitated her soft voice. Another joked about how she probably planned Ethan's schedule down to when he should breathe. The room roared with laughter. Ethan laughed too. Claire looked at him, hoping for a sign. A small shake of the head, a quick, "Guys, enough," but it never came. He just smiled and took another sip of his drink. Her hands trembled slightly as she collected empty plates. The sound of glass clinking felt louder than usual. Every time she walked past, they threw another joke, about her cooking, her politeness, even the way she sat. "Claire's like the class teacher, always watching us," Ryan said, grinning. "Careful, she might give us detention." Laughter again. She forced a smile, pretending not to care. But her heart pounded faster with every comment. She told herself they were just drunk, that men acted silly when they got together. But it didn't feel like harmless fun anymore. It felt mean. It felt personal. Then someone suggested a game, something they used to play in college called the roast. Each person picked someone and had to make funny but harsh jokes about them. Claire hesitated when Ethan's name came up. "You don't have to," she began, but he interrupted, laughing. "Come on, Claire, it's just for fun," she nodded, trying to seem easygoing. The jokes started again, and somehow, they all chose her as the target. They made fun of her neat handwriting, her quiet nature, even her job. "So, Claire," Liam grinned, "do you ever let Ethan make a decision, or do you schedule that too?" The room erupted. Ethan laughed louder than anyone. That sound, his laughter, cut deeper than the words. It was the kind of laughter that said, "You're alone in this." Claire sat there, frozen, cheeks burning. She wanted to stand up and leave, but her legs felt heavy. The noise, the laughter, the mocking. It all blurred together until she couldn't even hear what they were saying anymore. She excused herself quietly, pretending she needed to get more ice. In the kitchen, the silence hit her like a wave. She leaned on the counter, breathing hard, staring at the reflection of the bright room in the glass cabinet. From there, she could still see them. Ethan and his friends laughing, joking, completely unaware of the storm inside her. Her hands gripped the counter edge. She wasn't angry. She was humiliated, betrayed even. The man who once told her she was his piece had just let his friends tear her down for amusement. As she stared at the half-empty glasses and crumbs on the counter, she remembered their first year of marriage, how Ethan used to defend her from even the smallest slight. Once, a stranger had spoken rudely to her at a cafe, and Ethan had stepped in instantly. "Don't ever talk to her like that," he'd said. His voice back then had made her feel safe, protected. Now, that same man sat just a few feet away, letting others treat her like a joke. The laughter grew louder. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was proof that something between them had quietly broken. Claire swallowed hard, blinking back tears. She didn't want to cry over something so small, but it wasn't small anymore. It was what it meant, that he didn't see her pain, or worse, didn't care. A voice from the living room called her name. "Claire, where's the ice?" She took a deep breath, forcing her face into a smile, and walked out with the bowl. Her heart was pounding, but her expression was calm. Too calm. She placed the bowl on the table, pretending not to notice their amused glances. "Hey, don't be mad," Jake said teasingly. We're just messing with you. You know we love you." She smiled politely. "Of course," but her voice cracked on the last word. Ethan didn't notice. He was too busy telling another story. She stood there for a few seconds, feeling invisible. Then she quietly picked up her phone, pretending to check the time. "I think I'll head to bed," she said softly. "Already?" Ethan asked, glancing up. "Yeah, early meeting tomorrow." He nodded, barely paying attention. "Sure, babe. Love you." She didn't answer. She just turned and walked away. Upstairs, she closed the bedroom door behind her and leaned against it. For a moment, she just stood there, listening. The laughter downstairs continued, louder than ever. Every sound pierced deeper, each laugh, each cheer. It was like listening to strangers living in her house. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped tightly, staring at the floor. The walls felt closer, the silence heavier. She could still hear Ethan's laughter echoing faintly. And in that moment, one thought sank deep into her heart. This wasn't just about a bad night. It was about something Ethan had lost. The part of him that once knew when she was hurting. Her eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. She took a slow breath, steadying herself. The house she once filled with love now felt like someone else's party. And as she lay down, the muffled laughter below blurred into a distant hum. A sound that would echo in her memory for a long time. Downstairs, Ethan's laughter rose again, carefree, loud, and full of joy. Claire stared at the ceiling in the dark, one silent tear rolling down her cheek, and whispered to herself, "When did I stop being part of your happiness? How do you sleep beside someone who let others humiliate you?" The morning sunlight crept through the curtains, soft and golden, but it didn't feel warm to Claire. The laughter from last night still echoed faintly in her head. Downstairs, she heard the faint clatter of dishes, Ethan cleaning up after the party. Normally, she would have joined him, joked about the mess, maybe even teased him about overpouring drinks again. But today, she just lay still, staring at the ceiling. Something between them had shifted. She could feel it like a crack in the floor she dared not step on. When she finally came down, Ethan greeted her with a casual, "Hey, sleepyhead." He smiled like nothing had happened. The same easy smile that once made her heart flutter now felt empty. "Did you have fun?" he asked, his tone light. Claire hesitated. "It got a bit much," she said quietly. He frowned slightly. "Much? You mean the jokes?" "Come on, Claire. They were just kidding." "You know how guys are." She wanted to say something, to tell him how those jokes made her feel small, how his laughter had hurt more than any words. But she stopped herself. She didn't want another argument, so she simply nodded. "Yeah, sure." Ethan leaned over to kiss her forehead, unaware of how cold her silence had become. "You're too sensitive sometimes," he said, half smiling. "You've got to learn to take a joke." That sentence hit harder than last night's laughter. She smiled faintly to hide the sting. After breakfast, she busied herself cleaning the kitchen. Ethan hummed to himself while scrolling on his phone. Every now and then, he chuckled at some message, probably from his friends. And each sound felt like a reminder of her humiliation. Claire kept wiping the same counter again and again, her reflection staring back from the polished surface. By the afternoon, she went to work. Her co-workers greeted her with cheerful, "Good mornings," but her voice sounded distant, rehearsed. She sat at her desk, staring at the computer screen, the same line of an email blinking back at her for minutes. Her mind kept drifting. The way they had all laughed, the way Ethan hadn't stopped them, the way he had looked at her, not with love, but with amusement. At lunch, her friend Emily joined her. "You okay? You seem quiet today." Claire forced a smile. "Just tired." Emily nodded, but her eyes lingered. She wanted to ask more, but Claire changed the subject. She wasn't ready to talk, because saying it out loud would make it too real. When she got home that evening, Ethan was watching TV. The same easy grin. "Hey babe," I ordered takeout. "Your favorite Thai noodles." She smiled, polite again, though her heart wasn't in it. He noticed. "Still upset about last night?" "No," she lied. "You sure? You seem tense." "Look, I didn't mean to upset you, okay? The guys were just having fun. They actually like you, you know." They said you were the classiest one in the room." She stared at him. "Ethan, they were making fun of me," he sighed. "You always read too much into things. Babe, you've got to relax. Not everything's an attack." She fell silent. He turned his eyes back to the TV. To him, the conversation was over. To her, it was just beginning, inside her heart, quietly tearing at everything she thought their marriage stood for. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay awake, listening to Ethan's steady breathing beside her. Every inhale and exhale felt like a reminder that he could rest easily while she couldn't. She turned away, her eyes open in the dark. She thought about the early days of their relationship, how Ethan used to notice everything, how he'd sense when she was upset before she even spoke. Once, he had driven across town just to bring her coffee after a bad day. That man had vanished somewhere along the way, replaced by someone who couldn't see the difference between laughter and cruelty. The next few days were quiet, but not peaceful. Ethan acted normal, like everything was fine. He talked about work, his friends, new weekend plans. Claire responded softly, pretending to, but each word between them felt like it had to pass through fog. One evening, as they sat at dinner, she tried again. "Ethan, can I ask something?" He looked up from his plate. "Yeah? Did it ever cross your mind that it might have hurt me? The way they talked, and you just laughed?" He frowned, his fork pausing midair. "Claire, why are we still talking about this? It was one night. It's done." "I know," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "but I just need you to understand how it felt." He shook his head, tired. "You're making something out of nothing. You always do this, dwell on small things." Something inside her went cold. That word again, nothing. Was she nothing? Was her pain just another small thing? She stood up quietly, gathered the plates, and took them to the sink. He didn't even look up. The sound of running water filled the silence. She stared at the soap bubbles forming on her hands. For a moment, she imagined her reflection in them, fragile, fading, easy to pop. Later, she sat on the porch alone, the cool evening air brushing against her face. The neighborhood was quiet, save for the distant hum of traffic. She looked up at the stars, wondering if this was how loneliness began, not in silence, but in being unheard. Ethan came out a few minutes later, holding 2 mugs of tea. "You're being quiet again," he said gently, sitting beside her. "Come on, let's not ruin our weekend mood." She looked at him, really looked. The man she had loved for years sitting next to her, smiling as if love alone could erase disappointment. But it wasn't that simple anymore. She wanted to say something, but all that came out was, "Yeah, okay." He nodded, satisfied, and sipped his tea. The next morning, Claire woke up before him. She stood by the window, watching the sunrise paint the sky pink and gold. It should have been beautiful, but she felt nothing, just the quiet ache of emptiness. She realized then that she wasn't angry at Ethan. She was disappointed. Disappointed that when she needed him to see her, he looked away. Disappointed that her voice, the one he once claimed he loved, now sounded like noise to him. When he finally woke up and greeted her with his usual, "Morning, babe," she smiled faintly and whispered back, "Morning." But inside, her heart whispered something else entirely. "I don't feel seen anymore." She turned to make breakfast, her movements mechanical, her mind elsewhere. She wondered how long people stayed in love after trust began to fade. That night, Ethan laughed at a message from his phone again. One of his friends had texted a meme about that night's roast. Claire looked at him from across the room, her chest tightening. He caught her gaze and smiled, unaware of the pain behind her silence. She turned away, whispering to herself, "If this is love, why does it feel so lonely? When trust starts to die, can love survive at all?" It had been 3 weeks since the party, but the memory still lived in Claire's mind like a bruise that refused to fade. Ethan had moved on easily, laughing with his friends, planning weekend hangouts, acting as if everything between them was normal. But to Claire, nothing felt normal anymore. Their home looked the same pictures on the wall, the same couch, the same morning coffee. Yet everything felt colder, quieter, emptier. She still loved him, or at least she thought she did. But that love now felt like holding a glass full of cracks. Beautiful, but ready to shatter with the slightest touch. Every day, she told herself she'd talk to him again. She'd try to explain how deeply it hurt that he'd let others mock her. But every time she opened her mouth, the words got stuck in her throat. Ethan was always busy or distracted. He'd kiss her cheek on his way out, text her "love you" between meetings, and yet somehow, she felt further from him than ever before. Mini hook. What happens when silence becomes louder than words? One evening, Ethan came home later than usual. His laughter filled the hallway before he even walked in. "Sorry, babe," he said cheerfully, dropping his jacket on the chair. "The guys wanted to grab a few drinks after work." Claire nodded. "Did you have fun?" He grinned. "Yeah, we were just talking about old times again. You know how it goes. Old times. That meant the same group, the same people who had laughed at her that night." She wanted to ask if they had talked about her again, but she didn't. She just said softly, "You seem to have fun with them." Ethan shrugged. "They're my friends, Claire. They've been around forever. You should hang out with us more. They like you." Her lips trembled slightly, but she hid it. "They like you." The words sounded like a cruel echo. If this was how people acted toward someone they liked, she didn't want to know what dislike felt like. Later that night, while Ethan showered, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. She didn't mean to look, but the screen lit up with a message preview. A group chat titled, "The Crew." One line glowed under the dim light. "Remember how Claire looked that night?" "Man, priceless," Claire froze. Her throat went dry. Her hands trembled as she set the phone down. When Ethan came out, towel draped around his neck, she was sitting silently by the window. "You okay?" he asked, rubbing his hair. She looked at him, the man she had built her life around, and said quietly, "Do they still talk about me?" He frowned. "Who?" "Your friends." He paused, sensing the tension. "Claire, are we really doing this again?" She stood up slowly, her voice shaking. "Just answer me." He sighed, exasperated. "I don't know, maybe. They joke about everything. You're taking this way too seriously." Her chest tightened. "Ethan, they humiliated me." "And you laughed." His voice hardened slightly. "You're overreacting again. I told you it was harmless." "Harmless?" she repeated, her voice breaking. "You let them treat me like a joke, and you call it harmless?" Ethan rubbed his temples. "I can't keep doing this, Claire. Every time we talk, it's the same drama. You need to move past it." She stared at him, speechless. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence between them felt like a wall. Thick, cold, unbreakable. That night, Claire lay awake long after Ethan had fallen asleep. She turned to look at him, peaceful, unaware. Once she used to feel safe watching him sleep. Now she only felt distance. The kind of distance you can't measure in miles, but in heartbeats. Mini hook. What do you do when the person beside you feels like a stranger? Days turned into weeks. Ethan and his friends met often, their laughter echoing through phone calls and text alerts. Claire noticed that every time his phone buzzed, he'd smile in that same easy way, carefree, comfortable, unbothered. She stopped trying to join their world. She stopped cooking his favorite meals, stopped waiting for him to talk, stopped hoping for an apology that never came. Instead, she focused on small things, morning walks, her work, reading late into the night. But even then, the emptiness followed her like a shadow. One Saturday evening, she walked past the living room and overheard Ethan laughing on a call. "Yeah, man, she's still mad about that stupid roast," he said between chuckles. "You know how sensitive she is." Claire froze by the doorway. He was laughing about her, not with her. Again, something inside her quietly broke. Not loudly, not with tears, but with calm finality. She walked upstairs, sat on the edge of their bed, and looked at the framed wedding photo on the nightstand, two smiling faces full of promise. She traced the edge of the frame with her finger, whispering, "Where did we go wrong, Ethan?" That night, she didn't sleep beside him. She lay facing the wall, eyes open, tears silently sliding onto the pillow. She didn't even wipe them away. The next morning, Ethan barely noticed her quietness. He kissed her forehead before leaving for work, saying, "Love you." She didn't answer. Mini hook. What happens when love stops feeling like love? By now, Claire had stopped pretending. She went through each day on autopilot, doing what she had to, speaking when necessary, smiling when expected. But inside, she felt nothing. Just a strange calm, the kind that comes when pain runs out of words. Her coworkers began noticing her distant stares. Emily, her friend, asked again, "Claire, what's really going on?" This time, Claire didn't fake it. She just whispered, "I think I'm losing my marriage, and I don't even know how it happened." Emily squeezed her hand. Sometimes it's not one big thing. It's 1,000 little moments of being unseen. Those words stayed with Claire all day. 1,000 little moments of being unseen. Yes, that's exactly what it was. When she got home that night, Ethan was already there, laughing again on his phone. His joy, once something she loved, now felt like proof of her loneliness. She walked past him quietly and went upstairs. He didn't even look up. In the bathroom mirror, she stared at her reflection. Her face looked the same, but her eyes were different, tired, distant, and sad. She touched the glass lightly, whispering, "Who am I becoming?" For the first time, she realized she wasn't just hurt. She was disappearing inside her own life. That night, as Ethan fell asleep beside her, she whispered to the dark, "You watched them take turns tearing me apart, and you smiled." Her voice trembled, but he didn't hear. Or maybe he didn't want to. The next morning, she found Ethan's phone buzzing again. Another message from the crew. It read, "Bro, you're lucky Claire hasn't left yet after that roast night. Any other woman would have been gone." Claire's eyes filled with quiet tears as she stared at the screen. Then she looked at Ethan, still sleeping peacefully beside her, and thought, maybe that's exactly what I need to do sometimes. Leaving isn't an act of anger. It's an act of self-respect. The next morning, the world outside looked calm, but Claire's heart wasn't. She sat at the edge of the bed, sunlight spilling over the floor, and watched Ethan sleep peacefully beside her. For a moment, she envied him, his ability to rest so easily, untouched by the weight she carried every day. There was no fight left in her now. No tears, no arguments, only silence, heavy, final, and full of truth. She walked to the window and looked out at the quiet street. The trees swayed gently in the early breeze, and for the first time in weeks, she let her mind wander to a question she had avoided. What if I just left? The thought scared her, but it also felt strangely freeing. When Ethan woke up, he found her in the kitchen, making coffee. She greeted him softly. "Morning, morning," he said, stretching. "You're up early." "Yeah," she replied. "Just couldn't sleep." He smiled, kissing her cheek lightly. "You worry too much, Claire. Everything's fine." But everything wasn't fine, and she knew it. The word fine had become his shield, the wall he built between them every time she tried to talk about her pain. She didn't argue this time. She simply nodded, her eyes distant, her voice calm. Maybe. He didn't notice the difference. He never did. Mini hook. When love becomes habit, does anyone notice when it's gone? The day went by like every other. Ethan at work, Claire at home. But something in her movements was different. She began to pack little things, her books, her favorite mug, a few clothes. Not in panic, not in haste, but with quiet precision. Every folded shirt felt like a memory. Every packed item a piece of herself she was finally taking back. She paused at the photo frame on the shelf, their wedding picture. They looked happy, glowing with dreams of forever. She smiled sadly, running her fingers over the glass. "We were supposed to be a team," she whispered. "But I guess I was the only one still playing." That afternoon, Ethan texted her, "Don't forget we're going to Ryan's this weekend." "The guys are excited." She stared at the message, feeling a chill crawl up her spine. The same people, the same laughter, the same humiliation waiting to happen all over again. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard before she typed, "I won't be coming." He replied with a laughing emoji and a line that broke her heart all over again. "Haha, still holding that grudge?" Grudge, that's what he called it. The night that broke her trust, the pain that she carried, a grudge. She turned off her phone and sat quietly for a long time. The clock ticked on, but she didn't move. She realized something powerful then. She couldn't change Ethan, but she could change what she accepted. Minnie Hook. The hardest goodbyes are the ones said without words. That evening, she made dinner, simple pasta, the way Ethan liked it. She set the table, lit a small candle, and sat opposite him as he came home, talking about his day. He didn't notice her silence, or the way she kept glancing at the folded note near the vase. After dinner, he leaned back, smiling. "That was great, see? You're finally in a better mood," she smiled faintly. "Yeah, maybe I am." He stood, stretched, and kissed her forehead. "See? I told you things would go back to normal. Normal." The word tasted bitter. She waited until he went upstairs, humming to himself, probably thinking everything was fine again. Then she quietly placed her wedding ring beside his glass, right next to the folded note. She looked around the living room one last time. The photos, the laughter frozen in frames, the promises now only decorations. She picked up her small suitcase and walked to the door. Her heart was calm, not racing, not breaking. Just calm. Outside the air was cool. The world felt new. Minnie Hook. Freedom doesn't always come with joy. Sometimes it comes with tears. As she drove away, she glanced at the house in the rearview mirror. The light still glowed warmly inside, unaware that something irreversible had just happened. She drove for miles without looking back again. Each turn of the wheel felt like peeling off another layer of pain. Her phone buzzed once. Ethan calling. She let it ring. Then it buzzed again. This time a text. "Where did you go?" She didn't answer. A few miles later, she stopped at a quiet rest area and took a deep breath. The night sky stretched endlessly above her, stars blinking faintly. She sat on a bench, closed her eyes, and let the silence wrap around her. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't pretending to be okay. She wasn't waiting for someone to understand her. She was just free. The phone rang again. She looked at the screen, saw his name, and this time, she picked up. "Claire?" His voice was sharp with confusion. "Where are you? What's going on?" She took a deep breath. "I left, Ethan." "What do you mean you left?" "Left what?" "The house. The marriage. The version of us where I kept hoping you'd see me." He went silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Claire, you're being dramatic again. Come home, we can talk." She smiled sadly. "You never listened when I talked, Ethan. That's the problem." "Please," he said, his voice softening. "Don't do this." Her eyes welled up, but her tone stayed steady. "I already did." She hung up before he could say more. The phone slipped from her hand, landing gently beside her on the bench. She looked up at the stars again and whispered, "I hope someday you understand that silence isn't forgiveness." The night breeze brushed her face, and for the first time she smiled. Not out of happiness, but out of relief. Minnie Hook. Some endings don't come with closure, only peace. Hours later, Ethan found her note. It was short, handwritten, and full of calm. "Ethan, I tried to talk. I tried to laugh. I tried to forgive. But I can't keep pretending that everything's fine when it isn't. You stopped seeing me long before I stopped loving you. I don't hate you. I just can't stay invisible anymore." Claire, he read it twice, 3 times, his chest tightening. He ran to the door, calling her name, but the street was empty. Only the sound of the wind answered him. He sat down on the couch, staring at the wedding ring lying beside his glass. It gleamed faintly under the kitchen light, a silent reminder of everything he took for granted. Upstairs, their framed wedding photo stared back at him. For the first time, Ethan noticed something he had never seen before. In that picture, Claire's eyes weren't just happy. They were full of faith, and now, that faith was gone. He leaned back, covering his face with his hands, whispering, "What have I done?" Meanwhile, Claire drove along the quiet highway, tears glistening in her eyes but a faint smile on her lips. The city lights faded behind her as dawn began to rise. She whispered softly, "This isn't the end. It's just the start of me." The camera fades out on the glowing horizon, leaving one question hanging in the air. Would Ethan ever realize what he lost before it was too late?